Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The summer sun beat down fiercely that morning, and the luxury car showroom gleamed like a jewel in its rays. Emily Thompson, elegant but nervous, pushed open the glass doors with a polite smile, hoping simply to buy a car for her daily commute. She had in mind a sporty model, understated yet refined, far removed from the extravagances associated with her family name. The moment she stepped into the showroom, the atmosphere shifted. The salespeople, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of curiosity and disdain, exchanged knowing glances. One of them stepped forward, a forced smile on his face, and made veiled remarks about her choice of car, implying she couldn't afford what she wanted. Emily felt her face flush, a sudden wave of shame washing over her. Each word seemed to weigh more heavily than the last. She tried to defend herself, but her arguments were met with stifled laughter and whispers from the other customers. At that precise moment, the marble floor of the showroom seemed to recede beneath her feet. She felt tiny, exposed, humiliated before these strangers who were judging her appearance and lifestyle. The swinging door then burst open with a crash that made everyone jump. An imposing figure stepped forward. The man, elegant and charismatic, stepped out of a gleaming black Rolls-Royce, a car no one had noticed before. All eyes in the room turned toward him, and the tension shifted instantly. Emily looked up and recognized her husband, Jonathan Thompson, the man whose discretion, wealth, and influence she knew well, but who, apparently, had chosen this precise moment to make his entrance. Silence fell. The salespeople who had ridiculed her moments before froze, unable to hide their surprise and embarrassment. Jonathan approached Emily, brushed her hand with a knowing smile, and murmured, "You don't have to worry, I'll take care of it." His words, simple yet powerful, transformed the humiliation into silent revenge. The eyes of the spectators were now fixed on him, and no one dared judge her anymore. What had begun as a routine visit to buy a car had turned into a humbling experience for those who had thought they could belittle Emily. And as the black Rolls-Royce gleamed in the sun, one thing became clear: the game wasn't over, and the sweet and spectacular revenge was only just beginning. Emily Thompson took a deep breath before stepping into the showroom. Each footstep echoed on the pristine marble floor, and she could feel the curious, even judgmental, stares of the salespeople and customers. She'd never been one to be easily intimidated, but today, something in the air made her nervous. Perhaps it was the thought of spending a significant amount of money on a car, or simply the feeling that everyone seemed to be scrutinizing her. "Hello, I would like to see the XLR Sport model," she said, her voice slightly trembling but polite. The seller, a man in his 40s with a strained smile, raised an eyebrow and replied in a tone that was half serious, half mocking. "Oh, you mean, this model is very ambitious for someone like you?" Emily felt a shiver run through her. The implied tone of mockery underestimated her from the outset. She tried to smile to mask her discomfort. "Yes, I'd just like to see it up close." The salesman made an exaggerated gesture towards the car, as if to signal that it was an unattainable dream. "Very well, but you know, this model is for those who can really afford it." Emily felt a lump in her throat. Other salespeople were whispering amongst themselves, and she could hear customers stifling laughter. Every word seemed to carry a ton of weight. She wondered how a simple visit could turn into a public humiliation. She wanted to leave, but the desire to show she wasn't intimidated held her back. As she examined the car, running her fingers along the leather, the sound of an engine roared to life. The glass doors flew open and a towering figure appeared. All eyes turned towards the entrance, and the air seemed to stand still. It was Jonathan, her husband. Elegant, self-assured, and dominating the room as if it belonged to him. He stepped out of his black Rolls-Royce, each movement exuding power and control. The salesmen who had dared to ridicule him just seconds before were now frozen, unable to hide their astonishment. Jonathan approached Emily, placed his hand on her shoulder and whispered in her ear. "You didn't need to come alone." A shiver of relief ran through Emily. She felt the tables turning. Where just moments before she had been humiliated and belittled, Jonathan's presence was transforming the atmosphere. Glances became cautious, mockery vanished, replaced by curiosity and admiration tinged with fear. Emily smiled slightly. For the first time since her arrival, she felt powerful, supported, and ready to take back control of the situation. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Jonathan's silent revenge was just starting. The silence in the showroom was almost palpable. Customers and salespeople stared at Jonathan Thompson, some with admiration, others with visible discomfort. Emily felt her shoulders relax slightly. Her initial fear was gradually transforming into pride and relief. Jonathan slowly approached the head salesman, the man who had humiliated her just minutes earlier. Without raising his voice, he said with icy calm, "Hello. I'm Jonathan Thompson, and I understand you had some doubts about my wife's ability to choose a vehicle." The seller, frozen, stammered, We just wanted to." Jonathan cut him off with a simple wave of his hand, imposing his presence like an invisible wall. "Just what? Judging someone before knowing them? Perhaps it would be wise to remember that appearances can be deceiving." Emily felt a mixture of admiration and astonishment. She had never seen Jonathan act like this in public. Usually discreet and reserved, he was transforming this humiliation into a silent but relentless lesson. Then, with a polite but powerful smile, Jonathan turned to Emily and said, "Choose the car you want. I'm sure the XLR Sport model will suit you perfectly." Emily's eyes lit up. She felt her courage returning. With newfound confidence, she approached the car, ran her fingers over the leather seat, and examined the details with meticulous attention. She noticed every finish, every stitch, every detail the salesman had tried to downplay. Jonathan, silent at her side, watched the scene. His gaze was both protective and proud. Emily realized that it wasn't just his wealth that made him an impressive man, but his ability to defend those he loved with dignity and elegance. The vendor, humiliated and speechless, tried to smile, but it was clear he had just received a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. Other customers, witnesses to the scene, whispered among themselves, either admiring or intimidated. Emily took a deep breath and, this time, spoke in a firm and confident voice. "I'll take this model. And thank you for presenting it to me properly this time." Jonathan placed his hand on her shoulder, a simple gesture that made her feel she was never alone, even in the face of others' arrogance. She knew that, from now on, she could face any situation with confidence, because she was no longer alone in this fight. And as the vendor walked away, head bowed, Emily realized that this day had begun with humiliation, but was ending with a quiet but brilliant triumph. As Emily admired the XLR Sport, Jonathan stepped back slightly to speak with the showroom manager. His gait was calm, but every movement exuded the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding respect without raising his voice. Emily could hear snippets of the conversation, and she felt the air crackle with an electric tension. The director, a man in an impeccable suit but with a cold gaze, tried to maintain his composure. He spoke in an authoritative tone. "Mr. Thompson. I didn't think you would come yourself." Jonathan smiled slightly, a smile that froze all pretension. "Well, I feel it's important to make sure my wife is treated properly. We had a slight misunderstanding with your salespeople, and I'd like you to understand the importance of respecting your customers, regardless of their background." The manager felt a prickle of discomfort. He understood that each word was a subtle but relentless lesson. Jonathan didn't shout or point fingers, but each sentence underscored the staff's incompetence and lack of professionalism. Emily, who witnessed the scene, felt an intense sense of pride. Her husband was transforming what could have been a humiliation into a demonstration of dignity and control. She understood that true power lay not in money alone, but in how one used their influence to defend others. The director, red with embarrassment, nodded slowly. "I understand, Mr. Thompson. It won't happen again." Jonathan made a slight gesture with his hand, polite but final. "Very good. We've all learned something today." Then he turned to Emily, and his gentle but confident gaze conveyed a silent message: You have nothing to fear." Emily felt a comforting warmth fill her chest. She then approached the vendor who had ridiculed her earlier. With a calm she hadn't known she possessed, she said, "Thank you for your help, this time." The salesman, still stunned, could only stammer, "Of course, madam," before disappearing into the back room. The other salesman now avoided making eye contact with Emily or Jonathan. As they walked away towards the XLR Sport, Emily realized that the day that had begun with humiliation had transformed into a lesson in confidence and power. But something inside her knew the story didn't end there. This was only the first act of a stylish and surprising revenge. Emily settled into the XLR Sport, feeling the soft leather and the perfectly crafted console beneath her fingers. Jonathan remained beside her, his gaze protective and attentive. For the first time that morning, Emily felt completely in control. She turned the key and heard the engine roar softly, a promise of restrained power. The salesman, still looking a little sheepish, explained the car's features, but Emily was only half listening. She was focused on the feeling of control and freedom the vehicle offered her. Every press of the accelerator, every turn of the steering wheel reinforced her confidence. As she left the showroom for a test drive, another vehicle caught her eye, a large, black SUV parked right in front of the door. The driver, an elegant man with a cold, calculating gaze, got out and approached the showroom. Jonathan narrowed his eyes slightly and whispered to Emily, "Get ready, it seems we have a spectator, someone who doesn't really appreciate seeing things turn out differently than they planned." The man stepped forward towards the showroom manager, speaking in an authoritative tone. "I'd like to see this car before it leaves." Emily immediately understood that this was an influential client, perhaps a competitor, who was used to bending everyone to his will. Yet, something about his attitude intrigued her. He was looking at her and the XLR Sport with a mixture of curiosity and challenge. Jonathan placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Ignore him for now. Focus on driving." Emily took a deep breath and hit the road, feeling the engine's power and the car's precision. Each turn gave her a sense of control, and each acceleration boosted her confidence. She realized that this car wasn't just a means of transportation, but a symbol, a reminder that no one could belittle her without consequences. Her rival's gaze followed her from a distance, interested but unable to predict what would happen next. Emily understood that a confrontation would soon arise, but this time, she felt ready to face it, not as a victim, but as a confident woman, supported by her husband and her own inner strength. The first drive ended, and Emily returned to the showroom, a smile on her face. Jonathan was waiting for her, proud, while her rival seemed to be considering the next step in his plan. This day, which had begun with humiliation, was now taking the form of a subtle battlefield where Emily would learn to defend herself, not with anger, but with dignity and intelligence. No sooner had Emily left the car to return to the showroom than she felt her rival's gaze upon her. The elegant, imposing man approached her with a cold, almost mocking smile. He spoke directly to Jonathan, but his tone suggested he was also targeting Emily. "Mr. Thompson, and you're his wife? Interesting. I've never seen anyone be so ambitious for a simple essay." Emily felt a slight surge of anger, but she held it back. Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "Stay calm. Show him that you don't need to prove anything to him." The rival crossed his arms and continued, this time addressing Emily. "If you really want to test your abilities, why don't you show me what you can do in this car? I know the road better than anyone." Emily took a deep breath. Instead of responding with anger, she straightened her back, her gaze determined. She took a step towards the XLR Sport and calmly declared, "I don't need to prove anything to someone who judges without knowing. But if you want, I can show you what it means to drive with confidence and control." The salespeople and customers in the showroom turned to watch the scene. The rival smiled in surprise, clearly amused by his audacity, but also intrigued. Jonathan, proud, watched his wife take the initiative. Emily got into the car, adjusted her seat, took the wheel, and started smoothly, perfectly controlling the acceleration and cornering. Every movement exuded confidence and control. Her rival watched her, realizing that the woman he had tried to intimidate wasn't going to back down. Upon her return, Emily parked elegantly, got out of the car, and crossed her arms. Her rival, still standing, seemed to momentarily lose his usual confidence. Jonathan approached, his gaze fixed on him. "Emily doesn't need your lessons. Perhaps you should learn to respect people before judging them." The rival, taken aback, nodded, unable to reply. Emily felt a wave of inner satisfaction. This wasn't just a personal victory, but also a clear message: she was no longer someone who could be belittled with impunity. The impressed customers whispered amongst themselves, while the salespeople remained frozen, aware that they had just witnessed a demonstration of control and dignity. Emily understood that this day had begun with humiliation, but was gradually transforming into triumph. She exchanged a knowing glance with Jonathan, who gave her a small nod, "Well done." Emily felt that, thanks to this support and her own determination, she could face all obstacles, even the most arrogant ones. As Emily finalized the details of buying the XLR Sport, her rival didn't seem ready to give up. Still standing near the entrance, he signaled to one of the salesmen, a nervous-looking man, and whispered something in his ear. Emily immediately sensed that something was up. Jonathan, attentive, placed his hand on Emily's shoulder and whispered, "Stay focused. Don't let anyone disturb this moment." A few moments later, the salesman approached Emily with a hesitant tone. "Ms. Thompson, it seems there's a small problem with the payment. We need to, check a few details." Emily felt her stomach clench. She instinctively knew that her rival was trying to delay or complicate the purchase to humiliate her once again in public. But instead of panicking, she took a deep breath and turned to Jonathan. "I'll take care of it," he said calmly. He took out his phone and called the bank directly, explaining the situation with quiet but unassailable authority. A few minutes later, he hung up with a smile. "Everything is in order. No obstacle can stop us." Seeing that his attempt had failed, the rival frowned, visibly frustrated. Emily felt a surge of confidence. She then addressed the salesman in a clear and assured voice. "Please double-check the details properly this time. I want everything to be transparent." The showroom manager, who had been silently observing the scene, approached and said, "Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Thompson, we apologize for the confusion and interruptions. Everything is now ready to finalize your purchase." Emily smiled, aware that she had just transformed an attempt at sabotage into a demonstration of control and dignity. Jonathan joined her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You handled it very well." The rival, seeing that his plan had failed and that the sellers now respected Emily, walked away in silence, his ambitions for domination thwarted by Jonathan's combination of courage, strategy, and unwavering support. Emily realized that every humiliation she had suffered up to that point had made her stronger. She was no longer simply the woman behind a billionaire, she had become a woman capable of facing adversity with intelligence and confidence. As the transaction was finalized and the XLR Sport shone under the showroom lights, Emily and Jonathan exchanged a knowing look, aware that this triumph was only the beginning of a new stage, one where their trust and complicity would transform every challenge into a victory. The XLR Sport's engine purred under Emily's fingers as she drove out of the showroom, the bright sun reflecting off the gleaming black bodywork. Every turn of the steering wheel reinforced her sense of power and control. She felt a freedom she'd never experienced before. This vehicle wasn't just a means of transport, it was an extension of her newfound confidence. Jonathan settled down beside her, silent but vigilant, ready to intervene if necessary. He knew that their first outing on the town would be more than just a drive, it was a silent declaration. Emily wasn't just supposed to drive, she had to show she could navigate a world where judgmental glances and unexpected rivalries were commonplace. Just a few streets away, another obstacle presented itself. A small crowd gathered around a cafe, catching her eye. Among the passers-by, an elegant but visibly haughty woman was watching her, accompanied by several people who were whispering and smiling. The air seemed thick with judgment. Emily felt an initial shiver, but Jonathan placed his hand on hers, reminding her to stay focused. She took a deep breath and smiled slightly. Instead of running away or stiffening, she slowed down, walked down the window, and waved politely. "Good morning." The woman, surprised by this calm and confident reaction, hesitated. One of the men in the group made a mocking comment, but Emily responded with a simple, confident look and a self-assured smile. Silence fell. She realized that her presence, combined with her newfound confidence, was more intimidating than she had thought. As she resumed her journey, a young man on a motorcycle nearly hit her, suddenly cutting across the road. Emily braked skillfully, maintaining control of the vehicle. Jonathan couldn't help but smile slightly. "Well done. You're handling that car perfectly." Emily felt a surge of pride. Every little obstacle, every critical glance or hostile gesture in the street, reinforced her confidence. She understood that her newfound self-assurance didn't depend solely on the car or Jonathan, but on her ability to face the world with calm and determination. At the end of this first outing, Emily parked the car in front of a park to admire the view. Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder and said gently, "Today, you proved that you don't need anyone to stand on your own 2 feet, but that sometimes, support makes all the difference." Emily nodded, aware that every challenge, every critical glance, every confrontation she had faced so far had prepared her for even greater trials. The city, with its stairs and judgments, had just become a training ground and a place of conquest for her. A few days after her first outing, Emily decided to head downtown to further test her XLR Sport and enjoy a sunny day. She felt a new excitement, each ride became a lesson in mastery, and every glance on the street reminded her that she was no longer someone who could be easily intimidated. However, as soon as she stepped onto the main avenue, she noticed an unusual tension in the air. The shop windows reflected more than just her image. Critical glances, whispers, and mocking smiles seemed to converge on her. And among them, the showroom's rival appeared, accompanied by several influential businessmen. He stepped forward, arms crossed, a provocative smile on his lips. "So, Miss Thompson, it seems you enjoy being the center of attention. Let's see if you can actually handle this car and this notoriety." Emily took a deep breath and replied calmly, "If you want to judge, look closely. But know that I am no longer someone who is underestimated." Her rival gave a sarcastic smile, thinking he could unsettle her, but at that moment, Emily started the engine and moved off. With perfect control, she navigated the heavy traffic, precisely avoiding obstacles while maintaining an elegant and confident gait. The spectators were silent, impressed by her expert driving. Jonathan, sitting beside her, observed every detail, proud of his wife. He knew this public display wasn't just to impress passers-by, it was a test of character. Emily had to prove she could remain calm, strategic, and confident in the face of intimidation. At a critical moment, her rival attempted to block her path by moving his SUV forward to intimidate her. Emily braked slightly, assessed the situation, and, with a perfect maneuver, bypassed the obstacle, leaving her rival speechless. Passers-by applauded quietly, aware of the tension and the challenge. Emily finally pulled up in front of a crowded cafe, her rival's gaze fixed on her, a mixture of frustration and admiration. She got out of the car, her back straight, a confident smile on her face. Jonathan joined her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Today, you transformed a provocation into a demonstration of strength and control." Emily felt a wave of satisfaction and pride wash over her. Not only had she managed to confront her rival, but she had proven to herself and everyone else that her courage, strategy, and confidence could turn around even the most tense situations. As they walked away, Emily knew it wasn't over yet. The day had shown she could stand up to the world, but other challenges, perhaps even more difficult, awaited her. And that thought no longer frightened her, she was ready. A few days after the incident downtown, Emily was getting ready to go out for a business meeting. She had chosen to drive her XLR Sport, a symbol of her regained confidence. Yet, a strange premonition ran through her. She sensed that someone was going to try to destabilize her once again. Upon arriving at the meeting place, she noticed an unusual crowd gathered in front of the building. Among the faces, she immediately recognized the showroom rival, this time accompanied by several people she didn't know, but whose aggressive attitude suggested hostile intentions. The rival stepped towards her with a mocking smile and said, "Ah, Emily Thompson, it would seem that the car and your husband aren't enough to stop you from being ambitious. But perhaps everyone should know some truths." Emily felt a pang of panic, but she took a deep breath and remembered the lessons of the past few weeks. Every humiliation she had endured had made her stronger. Rather than responding with anger, she chose strategy and calm. "What truths?" she asked, her voice firm and controlled. The rival, hoping to unsettle her, revealed a document insinuating compromising information about Emily, rumors intended to tarnish her public image. Passers-by began to murmur, some looking at Emily curiously. Jonathan, standing beside her, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and whispered, "Ignore them. We'll handle this intelligently." Emily took a deep breath, and with surprising calm, she smiled and replied, "If you want to expose rumors, do it properly. But know that the truth always comes out in the end." She took out her phone and, within minutes, sent a message to the showroom manager and his business contacts, clearly outlining the attempted defamation. Support quickly poured in. Colleagues, friends, and even clients who had witnessed the scene rallied to Emily's defense, turning the attack into a humiliating blow for her rival. The rival, thrown off balance, tried to continue, but he was interrupted by Jonathan, whose icy stare was enough to silence even the most audacious. Emily felt a wave of inner satisfaction. For the first time, she had used not only her confidence, but also her strategy and her network to turn the situation to her advantage. As they left the place, Emily turned her gaze to Jonathan and said, with a smile mixed with pride and complicity, "Today, I understood that I could defend myself, even against those who seek to attack me personally." Jonathan simply replied, "And that's exactly why I'm by your side. But know that the story isn't over yet." Emily nodded, aware that the final act was approaching, the one that would seal her ultimate victory and put an end to the humiliations of the past. A few days later, Emily and Jonathan decided it was time to put an end to their rivals' humiliations and provocations. Their plan was based not on anger, but on strategy, elegance, and quiet justice. They organized an exclusive presentation at the showroom, inviting clients, journalists, and automotive influencers. The carefully worded invitation mentioned Emily Thompson's participation and her experience with the XLR Sport. The rival, thinking he could still try to unsettle her, attended the event, confident and defiant. Emily entered the room, dressed with understated yet radiant elegance, accompanied by Jonathan. Every step exuded confidence and control. All eyes turned to her, and a respectful silence immediately fell. As her rival began to make his sarcastic remarks, Emily spoke up. "A few weeks ago, I was judged and ridiculed for my choices and who I am. Today, I show you what a determined person, supported by strong values, can accomplish." With a simple gesture, she invited all the guests to follow her outside. There, the gleaming, immaculate XLR Sport awaited. Emily climbed into the vehicle and gave a masterful demonstration, perfect handling, controlled acceleration, and tight corners executed with precision. The spectators were speechless, captivated by her skill and confidence. Jonathan, observing the scene, knew the message was clear: Emily was no longer vulnerable, and every past attempt at humiliation had backfired on those who had thought they could intimidate her. Her rival, meanwhile, paled before everyone's eyes. His attempt at domination had failed spectacularly. After the demonstration, Emily got out of the car and addressed the crowd. "Humiliations and judgments do not define who we are. It is our actions, our confidence, and our dignity that do." The public applauded enthusiastically. Customers and journalists immediately understood that the real lesson of this day went far beyond the car. It was about courage, resilience, and self-control. The rival, publicly humiliated this time, could only lower his eyes. Jonathan approached Emily, placing a hand on her shoulder with a tender smile. "You transformed adversity into triumph." Emily replied, her heart light but proud. "And that's how we get back up, always stronger, always more confident." As the sun set and Jonathan's black Rolls-Royce gleamed in the parking lot, Emily knew that this day marked the end of her humiliations and the beginning of a new life, a life where she was never a victim, always in control of her destiny, and able to face any challenge with grace and strength. The curtain fell on this story of humiliation transformed into brilliant revenge, but Emily's brilliance had only just begun.